It's time for Past Access, a barrier-free tour through history. Now, here's your host, Pete Coleman.
Washington, D.C., the nation's capital. This gleaming city upon a hill serves as living monument to the preceding generations of Americans that built this republic. You see it in the neoclassical buildings of power and the monuments dedicated to the lives lived and the lives lost. In Part 1 of Past Access American Pride, we covered a great deal of America's past and how that past is commemorated in museums, artifacts, and as well by treasured stories. But as promised in Part 2, we will introduce you to the charmed city of Baltimore and the eastern shore of Maryland. From Chesapeake Bay blue crabs to battlefields, Past Access is on the move to bring you the best of the Baltimore-Washington region. Before we head up to Baltimore, let's stop by 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue in Northwest D.C. That's right, the White House. This is the residence of the President of the United States, the head of the executive branch of the American government. And from 4 to possibly 8 years, this person will occupy and work from this address. Built in the year 1800, 44 successive U.S. presidents have called this place home, all except the first one, George Washington. It can serve as an epicenter of domestic and international policy, as well as a place of protest and unrest. 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue is a happening location.
So we made our way down to the White House, and always a place of a lot of excitement and some protests and those type of things, no matter who's in the office. And you'll see that it's very busy, either with newscasters doing their stand-ups, kind of like what I'm doing here today, or get a chance to have people protesting any issues. Freedom of speech, one of the biggest issues here that people celebrate in the United States, and doing it right outside the residence of the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief.
The White House is open for tours, even with the high levels of security that tighten from time to time. But you will need to book several months in advance. Wheelchair access can be set up through the visitor entrance welcome area, and then you're provided an escort to an elevator to the stateroom. We can thank former President Franklin Delano Roosevelt for much of the wheelchair access seen through the building, as accessibility renovations had to be made for his wheelchair during his terms. Once inside, tour groups are kept on a strict route in either the East Wing, which is the residence of the President, or the West Wing, where all the business is conducted. You may be allowed a quick doorway peek into the Oval Office, if you're lucky. The White House, of course, is a well-known location, but not more than a stone's throw away across Jackson Square is another important federal-style home called the DECATUR House. This is one of my favorite stops in the area, and not only because of great wheelchair accessibility, but also because of the overlooked history found here. This was the home of U.S. Navy Commodore Stephen Decatur Jr., one of the early Republic's most heralded figures of the day, a real rock star of the early 19th century. Decatur built his home from the award money received for the defeat and capture of the British HMS Macedonian. Decatur's feats of bravery were many during the war with Barbary pirates and against the British during the War of 1812. So to say he did not have lofty political aspirations by building his home so close to the White House would be ridiculous. This guy was going places. That is until his untimely demise from a duel gone bad. He bled out from a gunshot wound to the abdomen right here in his very home.
And he was rushed here through these doors right here from the front door of Decatur House into this parlor behind me. And he bled out on a couch, not this particular couch, but a couch that was right here under the window in front of his wife, Susan.
Painstaking historical conservation efforts have been made to keep the Decatur House and the urban slave quarters true to various historical eras. Yet wheelchair accessibility was not ignored, and that is why we are here today. It is such a rare thing to have such wheelchair access to much of a historical home through ramps, lifts, and elevators.
But this is an example of adding some wheelchair accessibility. You hear me over the motor? Wheelchair accessibility to a historic house and be able to do it in a way that's functional.
The White House Historical Association deserves great credit in this forethought for accessibility. Check out the federal-style lines of famous American architect Benjamin Latrobe. See the aforementioned spot where Stephen Decatur took his last breath, and wheel across the wooden floorboards of one of the nation's rare examples of urban slave quarters attached to the rear of the home. Outside the Decatur House, the beautiful Lafayette Park at Jackson Square has seen a lot of history. Some good and some bad. It was here that you could see the British Army laying torches to the newly built White House and setting the capital city aflame during the War of 1812. Those were dark times in an often ugly war with England. The Second War for Independence, that in the early days was not going so well for the upstart Americans. Defeats in Canada, all points along the eastern shore of Maryland, and now the burning of Washington, D.C., were not exactly high points for the United States. The fledgling republic was getting its collective butt kicked in 1814, all except for a tough little fort in the city of Baltimore, no more than 40 miles away. So with that, let's leave Washington, D.C. for now, and jump into the car and head up I-95 to the good old charm city of Baltimore and Fort McHenry. This fort is a true national park treasure, a place of defiance that helped to give birth to a legendary flag and a future national anthem. The Welcome Center will introduce you to the highs and the lows of the War of 1812, including the successful defense of the fort and the city of Baltimore. The film will help you fill in the blanks to this era with a reveal that is pretty spectacular as the wall disappears to show the panoramic view of the fort and a replica of the Star-Spangled Banner. The pathway to the fort is pretty wheelchair-friendly until you get close to the fort entrance. But let's stop here to take it all in as we look across the Patapsco River.
So welcome to Baltimore and Fort McHenry. This is one of my favorite places to come when it talks about history in the Washington-Baltimore area, mainly because this is one of the very few victories that we had during the War of 1812. And just in 1814, when things were going just as bad as they possibly could for the Americans, the British had kicked the tails of the Yanks out of Canada, Quebec, and Montreal. The city of Washington, D.C. was on fire. By mid-September of 1814, things were looking pretty bleak. The troops that we had in Bladensburg, Maryland, basically ran. They were just normal folks and basic militia, and they turned tail and ran. They came up this way to help defend the city, and if it wasn't for the Barney's flotilla, if it wasn't for George Armistead to keep this fort from going south to the British, things would have been much, much different for the Americans, the American cause.
Wheeling into the fort itself can be daunting, with the cobblestones to navigate, but once inside you can push through several barrack halls and even go up the hill to the top of the ramparts to get a better view of the river. It is here that I want you to squint your eyes to just imagine the mid-September 1814 view. The scene would have been epic. 50 of Britain's ships in firing range of the fort and the city herself. Armed with cannon shot and incendiary rockets, the British forces fired some 1,800 explosive bombs at the fort. All that was protecting the city was Armistead, his fort, and some militia. As luck and determination would have it, the men of Fort McHenry outlasted the British bombardment, and by dawn's early light, a large American flag flew in defiance over the undefeated fort. On September 13, 1814, British forces left the area to regroup for an attack on New Orleans, but not before Baltimore lawyer and temporary POW Francis Scott Key would pen the poem The Defense of Fort McHenry. Set ironically to the tune of an old British drinking song, the poem bolstered the spirits of a nation and would officially be recognized as the national anthem much later in 1931. The naval tradition of this part of Maryland is another point of pride. The U.S. Naval Academy is not too far away, and it's not uncommon to see a bunch of midshipmen hopping around this town from time to time. You can take in some of this love of the Chesapeake Bay down at the Inner Harbor. It is here that ships of all sizes sail and motor in. A quick drive from the fort and around Federal Hill, and you can see our next stop. It's a mid-19th century sloop of war, the USS Constellation.
So finally on board the USS Constellation here in Baltimore in the Inner Harbor. It is not a frigate. It looks like a frigate. It's got most of the frigate sort of designs with the 3 masts and the guns on the second level, just not on the first level. So it's really considered more of a sloop of war.
Okay, there might be some dispute if she was a frigate or a sloop of war, but what's not in dispute is her interesting history. The USS Constellation's claim to fame happened before the American Civil War. Not so much as a battle platform, so to speak, but as an anti-slavery enforcer, and was the last sail-only warship designed and built by the United States Navy. In June of 1859, she was recommissioned for service with the Africa Squadron. Now this is where it gets really interesting. She arrived off the mouth of the Congo River on the 21st of November of that same year and began operating as part of the Africa Slave Trade Patrol. This came into effect on September 26 of 1860 when the Constellation captured the bark Cora, which had 705 slaves aboard. They were all released in Monrovia, Liberia.
All right, so I'm here with my son Nathaniel. He's my cameraman, by the way, on this trip for Past Access. Thank you, Nathaniel. Nathaniel, you got a chance to look at the ship. What was your idea about what the ship looked like downstairs?
Well, you have 3 levels. Of course, you have the top level, that doesn't really count. But then you have the second level where you have all the guns. Then there's the 3rd level, and all the sailormen sleep in there.
So now, you were here when we had troubles getting in today, and that's one thing that you always need to remember. If you're a wheelchair historical traveler like we are here on Past Access, you're not going to always have the best situation when it comes to elevators or broken lifts, and that's kind of what happened today. The lift getting onto the ship was broken, so we had to kind of climb up some stairs, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
And then was a little help from Nathaniel to get up the gangplank, which you might need. Traveling here solo might be tough in a wheelchair. Once you get onto the ship, you get another lift. That lift was broken, right?
Yeah, and my advice is if you do this, it's better to have just in case someone that can help you out, maybe your partner or even your son like me, and just give your father or your friend a little push to help him out.
That's true, and in this chance we got to send Nathaniel down where I couldn't go today. So that's some of the footage you have today is courtesy of my boy. So thanks, buddy.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right.
As a quick point of reference, always call ahead to the museum, as there is a possibility lift or elevator systems could be down for repair. We have done a lot here in Baltimore, but no real summer day in this city is complete without a visit to the ballpark at Camden Yards to see the beloved Baltimore Orioles. This town adores her Oriole baseball team. My youth was filled with trips to Old Memorial Stadium to see a young Cal Ripken Jr., Eddie Murray, and even Jim Palmer. In 1992, the Orioles moved into a then new and groundbreaking stadium that set the architectural tone for baseball stadiums for the next 20 years. It was known as a traditional retro throwback design to incorporate a stadium look and feel from the early part of the 20th century. There may not be a better baseball view from the stands than from the seats at Oriole Park at Camden Yards.
And I got to tell you, this is one of my favorite baseball parks ever. San Francisco is great, no doubt. PNC Park in Pittsburgh is great. Busch Stadium in St. Louis, wonderful. But this place is very special to me. I kind of grew up watching the Orioles here at Camden Yards. You can see the warehouse right behind me. A lot of great memories.
So much thought has gone into making the stadium wheelchair-friendly, specifically accessible restrooms, elevators, air-conditioned cool-down areas for those hot summer afternoon games, and a line-of-sight design so that even when fans stand up in front of your seats, you can still see the excitement on the field. Another important part of taking in an American baseball game is the food. Maybe start with an SK hot dog when you arrive, a Baltimore-style crab cake sandwich by mid-game, and if you can handle it, a pulled pork plate from Boog Pal's Barbecue near the outfield walkway on Utah Street. The wonderful food smells alone are a huge part of the Camden Yards experience. If you have to remember a few key points about this part of the baseball tour, a Maryland crab cake sandwich is well worth a hefty $13. The chant "Let's Go O's" should be stitched on the Maryland state flag. And Brooks Robinson was the best third baseman to ever play the game. Brooksy was the man.
So we're wrapping things up here in Baltimore. This is my son Nathaniel. He's been with me on a lot of these trips out for baseball around the United States, and I guess that's a wrap for us, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what do we say when we wrap things up?
Well, past access. There it is.
Thanks, son, but we're not quite done with the show yet. We still have a tour of the western and eastern shore of Maryland coming up on our way back to D.C. I have a feeling that on the other side of this break, we will get some great insight into a unique Maryland eating experience near the Chesapeake Bay. So with that, stay tuned. Next time on Past Access, come with us to discover the beauty of the Veneto region of Italy. From the timelessness of the floating city of Venice and the enchanting legends of Verona, to the peaceful waters of Lago di Garda, Past Access has you booked on a vacation you won't soon forget. We will put our wheelchair travel skills to the test, traveling on planes, trains, and vaporetti. Andiamo! There's no time to waste, as there is so much to see on the next Past Access. Chesapeake Bay has come a long way since my youth. Water pollution and poorly planned urban development were destroying the ecology of the bay, and with it, the plant and animal life so important to those who live off the bay. Through successful and expensive environmental legislation, regulation, and changes in behavior, the Bay region is back to being healthy again. And this is seen in the bumper crop of blue crabs and other bay life. So on our way back to D.C., we take a little detour so I can see an old high school friend of mine, Trang Anderson. We both grew up in Northern Virginia, but she and her husband now call the Eastern Shore home. And that particular home floats. That's right, as Trang puts it, they are liveaboards now, living full-time on their boat near Tracy's Landing, Maryland, on the Chesapeake Bay. Crabbing is a way of life here, and even if that's not your day job, many Marylanders know the basics of catching, steaming, and eating crabs. Call it a cultural necessity to fit in around here. So with your crab knife and mallet in hand, let's turn it over to Trang to give us a lesson on eating Chesapeake Bay blue crabs.
Okay, 15 minutes are up. I'm gonna take the crabs out of the pot. Ooh, steam. Smells really, really good. And we'll go inside to eat it. Ready to eat this Maryland blue crab. What you want to do is take the hind leg here, put your thumb on it, and you want to just pull the shell like this. And it comes off really easy. Then you want to take the gills off. I've been calling this the lungs, but they're gills. Oh, and then you take the apron off in the back, so it's easy to break. So we clean up the mustard if you don't like it. The mustard is actually pretty sweet tasting. So you flip it to the back, and then you put your two thumbs in the middle to break it in half. Most Maryland people will take the crab and you take the knife and cut it lengthwise like this. As you can see, when you open it up, all you really do is just slide your finger through the chambers. Now, a lot of people don't like picking crabs because it's so time-consuming and messy, but the best part about eating crabs is sitting around the table with friends and family and chit-chatting all day. The crabs are so delicious. Of course, the bigger the crab, the easier it is to get the meat out. So use your cracker and just crack the shell. There we go. And then we have this sauce that you can make. You put apple cider vinegar with Old Bay and just dip it. so good. But anyways, that's how you open a Maryland blue crab.
Consider it a bonus to have your hands still smell like Old Bay seasoning for a day or two. Trang Anderson is on the spot when she says eating a bushel of crabs is a communal experience. It forces you to slow down, take your time to husk, eat, talk, and drink some cold beer with friends. Leave the hurried life of DC behind and enjoy the summer scenery of Bay life. Back in DC, it's time to pack it up, say our goodbyes to family and friends, and enjoy some final scenes of the nation's capital. This homecoming to the DC and Baltimore area was exactly what I needed. Don't get me wrong, living in Europe is amazing, but my roots are here, and this trip with my kids proved to be the reconnection I needed to the States. It is here where I still have wonderful childhood memories and connections to family and friends, and the memories of those no longer here. Just across the Potomac River, my grandfather rests at Arlington National Cemetery, among thousands of other Americans that dedicated their lives to this nation. The cemetery is an eyeshot of the September 11th Memorial and the Lincoln Memorial, both places I highly recommend visiting before you leave D.C. I like to come to the Lincoln Memorial to see the throngs of tourists marvel at the view from Lincoln's statue across the reflecting pool. I reread Lincoln's words etched in stone from the Gettysburg Address, and I feel a bit more optimistic on the current state of affairs in the world today. I consider it a reaffirmation of the American mission statement, especially the last few lines of his speech. So that that nation shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Not too bad for a small-town Illinois lawyer. If there is truly an altar to the American spirit, in my opinion, it is here. We want to thank you for joining us on this past access trip to the United States. We also want to acknowledge these fine folks for their insight and assistance into making this program possible. Please follow my barrier-free journeys around the world at pastaccess.com. You can support the show by liking and subscribing here on YouTube.
Well, we hope you've enjoyed this great tour of Washington, D.C. and the United States of America, at least this little part of it. This has been a wonderful homecoming for me to come back to my hometown and show our audience a little bit about where I grew up in the area and see this amazing place of Washington, D.C. and all other points in between on this particular trip. There's a lot of history here for you to see, and we hope that we gave you a taste of it from a wheelchair perspective as well as a person that can walk. This place is an amazing place to be, and there's always something to see here. We only touch the surface here, folks, so when you come here, make sure that you really kind of take as much as you can in, and remember you can always come back to Washington, D.C. They'll be happy to have you here. So until next time, I'm Pete Coleman for Past Access. We're history.
You have been listening to Past Access with Pete Coleman. For more information on the show or insight to disabled access at historic locations, please visit us at pastaccess.com.
Welcome to Postscript with Pete, the Past Access recap show covering insight on disability travel and further historic context to this episode.
Hello and welcome to Postscript with Pete. I'm Pete. I hope you enjoyed watching part 2 of American Pride, our show for DC and Baltimore. And what a wonderful time I had going back home to see my family and friends and some old wonderful places I hadn't seen in so many years. There are so many great things to see in the DC and Baltimore area that we couldn't quite get it all in one show, so we did a part 1 and 2. You'll see that quite often on our show Past Access, that we're just going to have too much to put into one program, so we'll have to split them into a part 1 and 2 format. That's definitely going to happen for our Venice and Veneto region coming up next time. But for right now, we're talking DC and Baltimore. And some of the things that we really wanted to show you, but we couldn't quite get to, were some of the great art museums in Washington, including the Freer Gallery and the Women in Art Museum. The Holocaust Museum on 14th Street is a very powerful museum that you need to see. There's some other wonderful places to see in Baltimore, and of course,
just around the Baltimore area would be Annapolis, Maryland. If you get a chance to take a tour of Annapolis and the U.S. Naval Academy, you won't forget it. But one thing I really want to send home the point here is that wheelchair accessibility in the capital area is very, very good. And that's something that you shouldn't have to worry too much about. The only caveat to that is basically the DC Metro system. And I think we were showing a little bit of that aspect, that you have to kind of look ahead to see on the web what elevators are broken, which happens all the time with DC Metro, and exactly what you might have to do to get from point A to point B. So with that in mind, DC is actually a pretty good place to travel around and see. And one other good point for Washington, the museums are free. For the most part, almost all the museums in the mall are free of charge. So that's something you want to take advantage of for sure. Let's go to our mailbag because we have a couple great emails that came across from some of our viewers, and we definitely want to talk about that. So our first mail today comes from Andre from Berlin. Hi Pete, I'm an expat living in Europe as well. Will you cover how well you can manage as a wheelchair user in Prague? I can only imagine it's difficult with the historical streets and buildings. Thanks very much, Andre. So Andre, yes, you are right. Prague can be a difficult place, but don't let the hype fool you, because Prague is a wonderful town, and with the right adaptive devices on your wheelchair, you can coast through over those tram lines and those cobblestones, and you can get into many, many buildings here, which is something that I definitely want you to experience if you come to Prague. We'll have a show in 2020 about Prague for sure. Let's take a look at our other message that we had coming in from Sophia. She's from New York. She says, love the show. Great, thank you, Sophia. We love the show and really enjoyed the Barcelona episodes. It looked like you did a lot of traveling through the city. Was there something that you did not do in Barcelona because of the time crunch or maybe the wheelchair access issues? Keep up the good work. All right, well, Sophia, thank you very much for watching the show, and Barcelona is one of my favorite trips so far, doing past access. Yes, time constraints was usually the biggest problem, but there was an accessibility issue for me, which is getting up from the water area, from the waterfront, all the way up to Montjuic, which would be the big overlooked mountain there. Montjuic has a very interesting history, and it's a lot of difficult terrain up there to be able to use a wheelchair to go see. So it can be done, but it's something that you'll have to kind of take a tour group maybe to get up there. There is a sky lift to get you from the middle part of Montjuic to the upper top part. That part is accessible if you can push up a giant ramp. But once you're there, you can sort of see some of the things, but the terrain is going to be tough. Before we leave you today, we want to definitely ask you to subscribe, like what we do here. Make sure you ring that bell and you get a subscription to our show so that every time we put out a new Past Access program, you'll be the first to know. And on top of that, leave us some comments. We'd love to hear your comments about things. If you're a wheelchair user, this show's for you, especially for you. So let us know what we can do as far as a program to get you the information that you might need for Past Access. And if you feel like you want to support the show, you can always go to podcastnicshop.com. We've got a lot of great things there, from hoodies and t-shirts to hats, covering our Past Access show and a lot of our other podcast programs. So until next time, I'm Pete Coleman. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.
This has been Postscript with Pete Coleman. Join us next time for another episode of Past Access, your barrier-free tour through history.